You hear about Iran, oil, and sanctions all the time in the news, right? But what is the actual story? In this explainer, we're going to break down how one country's huge oil reserves turned into a global flashpoint and what that whole power struggle really means for the rest of us. It all starts with just one number, 10%. That's how much of the entire planet's known, proven oil reserves are sitting under Iran. It's a staggering amount of energy wealth, all buried under one single country. So that leads to the big question, right? How on earth did this black gold go from being just a resource in the ground to being the absolute heart of a global power struggle? Well, let's dive in and find out. To really get what's going on, we first have to wrap our heads around the sheer scale we're talking about. See, this isn't just a country that happens to have some oil. Iran is a true global energy giant. To make that 10% figure a little more real, think about it like this. For every 100 barrels of proven oil that we know exist on Earth, doesn't matter if it's in Texas, Siberia, or under the North Sea, about 10 of those barrels are in Iran.
And get this, it's not just about the oil. Iran also has one of the world's largest reserves of natural gas. When you put those two together, it makes the country an absolutely crucial energy supplier, especially for a place like China, which is its biggest customer.
But here's the thing, Iran's power isn't just about what's under the ground. It's also about where it is on the map. And that brings us to a tiny little strip of water that has enormous global importance.
This is the Strait of Hormuz. It's one of the most critical waterways on the entire planet. We call it a choke point because it's a super narrow passage that a massive amount of global trade is forced to squeeze through. And because of its geography, Iran is basically the gatekeeper. Now, get ready for this number, 20 million. That's how many barrels of oil sail through this tiny strait every single day. The scale of that is just mind-boggling.
To put that another way, almost 20% of all the oil the world uses every day passes through this one little spot. So if that artery ever gets clogged, the global economy could basically have a heart attack. That gives Iran an incredible amount of strategic leverage.
So now we've got the two big pieces of the puzzle, massive oil reserves and a critical strategic location. This mix of oil, money, and power, that is the absolute core of the conflict with the United States.
And you know, it really all boils down to money. Before the heavy sanctions kicked in, oil wasn't just part of the Iranian government's budget, it was the engine, bringing in about 40% of its total income. That's a huge dependency and, well, a huge vulnerability.
So from the American point of view, the big question is, where is all that oil money going? The official concern is that these profits are used to fund things Washington sees as destabilizing, like supporting armed groups, developing missile programs, and spreading Iran's influence across the region. The logic is pretty simple. Cut off the money, you cut off the activity.
And that very logic led to a very specific, very aggressive policy, especially under the Trump administration. It was called maximum pressure. The name kind of says it all, right? It was designed to squeeze Iran's economy by going right after its most important asset.
And they weren't exactly subtle about it. The goal was stated with crystal clarity. Take Iran's oil exports down to zero. The idea was to completely sever Tehran from its primary financial lifeline. So how do you even enforce that around the world? You use this really powerful tool called secondary sanctions. The way it works is simple, but it's also pretty brutal. The US doesn't just punish Iran for selling its oil. No, it punishes anyone else in the world for buying it by threatening to lock them out of the entire US economy. It's a heck of a warning to Iran's potential customers. But Iran wasn't just going to take this lying down. It fought back. It created this incredibly sophisticated clandestine system to keep its oil and its money flowing.
Honestly, the playbook for this shadow system is something straight out of a spy novel. You've got tankers turning off their tracking systems to go dark, using fake documents to hide where the oil came from, and selling it through secret back channels to buyers who are willing to take the risk. It's a high-stakes cat-and-mouse game out on the open seas.
And where does most of this shadow oil actually end up? Well, the number one destination is China. China's huge need for energy, combined with its own rivalry with the US, has made it Iran's most important partner in this whole shadow economy. Okay, so we've got geopolitics, secret sanctions, shadow fleets. Sounds like a movie, right? But what does any of this actually have to do with you? Well, it turns out this regional struggle has global consequences that can hit you right in the wallet. Think about it. When nearly 10% of the entire world's oil supply is caught up in a conflict, it sends shockwaves everywhere. Any threat of disruption over there can cause global oil prices to spike. And that doesn't just mean more expensive gas for your car, it drives up the cost of making and shipping pretty much everything, which fuels inflation and messes with the supply chains we all count on.
Which really leaves us with one final big question. For decades, oil has been at the very center of geopolitics. But as the world slowly but surely starts to shift towards new forms of energy, you have to wonder, for how much longer will this black gold really define the balance of global